Andy, what's the one thing that holds people back in life?
Normally, it's their coping mechanisms. So let me explain what I mean by that. Because people talk about what holds you back. People talk about some invisible barriers. Now, when you were younger, I imagine that you probably, when you rode a bike for the first time, when you were young, you put some stabilisers on, right?
To protect, yeah?
Yeah, so little training wheels. And they have the effect of stabilising you, as in keep you stuck upright. So they're a coping mechanism for going forward on a bike. But human beings or adults have other type of coping mechanisms because we all want to stay out of pain, right? And so we've all had experience in the past of pain and upset and fear and loss and conflict and rejection and all these things and failure. And so what we tend to do is we develop these coping mechanisms to soften or protect ourselves from experiencing those things again. And the thing is, those coping mechanisms actually work. Procrastination is a coping mechanism. For example, alcohol can be a coping mechanism for somebody. Keeping busy is a coping mechanism for somebody.
Perfectionism?
Trying to control things. That's a perfect example of perfectionism, is a control thing. Or it could be analysing or dissociating and staying in your head is a coping mechanism. As is shrinking down to fit in is a coping mechanism. And so the coping mechanisms, they actually work. But they actually also, the cost of a coping mechanism is your potential. And also the cost of it can often be that there's a cost to other people as well. So when people say, you know, like you said, what holds them back, it's not that they don't have the ability, it's that their coping mechanisms slow them down. So again, think you're riding a bike today, but you've got stabilisers on.
Yep.
Now as an adult, not only are you going to look a bit stupid, and everybody else can see, oh, you know, they're acting a bit strange, or, you know, what's the problem? And you can't see it typically. But also, even if you did ride that bike today as an adult, and you would obviously probably not fall off, you'd go slowly. Or navigating the twists and turns of life would be tough. So actually the very thing that helped you stay stable in the beginning is now actually the thing that's hampering you. So you've got to undo your coping mechanism and actually live in the moment and do whatever needs to be done. Because it's implementing, doing new things that people start. Everyone can do whatever they want. It's just they've got a fear of actually implementing. And the reason is they're often afraid of the solution, not the problem.
Do you think many people know what their coping mechanism is?
No, as always, most of the time most people don't have self-awareness. It's outside of the sphere because you're just being you, or you think. But I tend to call these things shadows. So what I mean by that is people have shadow selves. There are 4 main shadow selves. The first one is called the controller, the second one's called the pleaser, the third one's called the computer, and the fourth one's called the distractor. So these 4 major coping mechanisms, people think that's themselves. It's not, it's your shadow, it's your coping mechanism trying to come out. It doesn't come out all the time, it only comes out under fight or flight.
And how do people realise what their coping mechanism is?
Well, either you've got to have enough self-awareness that you spot it yourself, you could listen to the advice of other people, or as a lot of cases these days, people need to go to sort of personal development events to kind of have a look back at yourself almost, because sometimes you need to have a new perspective to look back at yourself, and someone to actually, you look at you and go, oh shit, yeah, I do that.
You say there's 4 different coping mechanisms. Do the British public fit in quite equally, 25% in each, or is there more in one than the other?
Well, interestingly enough, we almost have access to all 4 at all times, because also your coping mechanism can sometimes be context dependent and environmentally based.
Yes.
So maybe at work you're the controller, but at home you're the pleaser. Right? Because it depends who's there. Because at home, if your wife's a controller as well, you can't be a controller as well, because otherwise you'll have too much conflict.
Too right.
So maybe you take the second, maybe because you value her love and acceptance so much, or avoid conflict, you take the lesser position, which makes you more the pleaser. Whereas at work you may be completely different. So they're often context dependent.
Is there any little, you know, some of these courses can be a lot of money. Is there any little great advice you give to someone for self-aware, making them more self-aware, writing things down or asking a good friend? Any tips?
Well, you know, ultimately our mind is somewhat like a computer, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
But a computer's only as good as the operating system it's running on. So if you think about it today, if you are running a computer today, you'd be running the latest software on your Mac or PC. But if you had a PC or Mac today and you were trying to run it on software that was designed in the 1990s, you'd be running on Windows NT or Windows 95. And if it didn't crash, it's at least going to go slowly. So you've got to constantly upgrade the software, and you've got to keep constantly upgrading this.
I mean, there's so much content out there on YouTube. It's sort of about having a look and actually watching this stuff and not reading headlines and going, oh, it's not for me. I mean, I've got a business coach myself, and it's been absolutely fantastic. But if you don't realise you need these people, then you've got to help yourself, haven't you, in this world?
But at the end of the day, you have to look at, where are you right now and where do you want to be? And if there's a gap between where you are and where you want to be, then you have to investigate and find out what are the strategies, solutions, ideas, or people that can quickly get you from where you are to where you want to be. Now, if you're happy where you are, then live your life and be good. But if you haven't got everything you want, then there's something stopping you, and you need to investigate it.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Andy.
All right.
Cheers. Thanks.
You're welcome.